Picture this. It's the mid-'80s, and you're an Air Force sergeant, trying to stay under the radar when your superior, a cocky and obnoxious tech sergeant named Rob, starts playing pranks that cross every line. He's got an unhealthy obsession with humiliating you and your colleagues. But what happens when he takes it too far? Standing at 5'10", he was all gangly limbs and a cigarette dangling from his lips, with a coffee cup permanently attached to his hand. His favorite pastime? Finding new ways to mess with the subordinates under his command. He was relentless, and he thrived on the chaos he caused. Unlike Rob, this man was calm, collected, and genuinely respectful. He didn't have an ego to feed or a need to belittle others. In fact, the captain was the kind of leader everyone could get behind. He listened, observed, and earned the respect of the entire team almost instantly. But this time, he crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. My car, my beloved Civic, was sitting there up on blocks. No tires. Nothing. Just resting precariously on those metal blocks, as if it were some kind of sick joke. My heart dropped into my stomach. I was frozen for a moment, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. My little Civic had been a reliable companion, always parked in the same spot every day. And he also knew that Rob needed to understand the gravity of what he'd done. This was the moment everything changed. The pranks had escalated to the point where there was no going back. Rob had made a big mistake, and now he was about to pay for it. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. Rob had gone too far. I had been humiliated in front of the entire office, and it wasn't just a prank anymore. It was a blatant act of aggression, and now Rob would have to face the consequences. But the more I stared at my car, the more it hit me. This wasn't just about a car. This wasn't just some harmless prank. Rob had decided to target something that I cared about, something that was mine and mine alone, and he had gone too far. I stormed back inside, furious, and the first thing I did was tell the captain. The captain's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He told Rob, in no uncertain terms, that this prank was no longer funny. Rob, of course, tried to make excuses, mumbling something about just having a little fun, but the captain wasn't having it. He made Rob work under his watch, ensuring that my tires were back on the car and everything was in place. Without skipping a beat, the captain, who had seen enough, immediately took action. He didn't waste time with words. The order was simple. Rob was going to put my tires back on, and he was going to do it right now. It wasn't much, just a small, beat-up car that got me from point A to point B, but it was mine, and I took care of it. It was this sense of powerlessness. Rob had taken something away from me, my dignity, my peace of mind, and frankly, my trust in my own workplace. This was the kind of prank you couldn't just laugh off. I felt humiliated, exposed, and completely helpless in that moment. His approach to leadership was refreshing. He wasn't out to intimidate anyone, and his demeanor was the complete opposite of Rob's. The shift in atmosphere was palpable, and for the first time, it felt like we had someone who would actually have our backs. The worst part? Nobody dared retaliate. Rob had a way of bullying people into submission, making anyone who tried to stand up to him fear for their career. Rob's pranks, while small in comparison to what would come later, were hard to ignore. After one prank in particular, where Rob put my car on blocks in the parking lot, things escalated. The captain immediately stepped in. Not only did he make Rob put my tires back on, but he also gave him a stern talking to. It was clear that Rob's behavior wasn't going to be tolerated under this new leadership. Word had already spread about his antics, and the captain soon witnessed a few of them firsthand. In a way, this new leadership wasn't just about protecting the team, it was about ensuring that justice would be served. The captain started to hatch a plan, a carefully crafted scheme that would make Rob regret every prank he pulled, especially the ones aimed at me. Little did Rob know, his days of being the office bully were numbered. He wasn't oblivious to the atmosphere Rob had created, one where bullying and pranks were the norm, and the rest of us had to endure it in silence. But little did he know, his reign of terror was about to come to a screeching halt. One morning, he kicked things off by supergluing my coffee cup to the plexiglass surface of my desk. The moment I reached for it, I watched in horror as the entire cup flipped over, splattering coffee all over the desk and papers. When Rob messes with the wrong guy, it sets the stage for a revenge plot that's so perfectly executed, even the higher-ups have to give their silent nod of approval. Stick around to hear how one sergeant turned the tables on his tormentor, and how it changed everything. Rob was the kind of tech sergeant who seemed to thrive on making life miserable for the people around him. The whole office erupted in laughter, which I couldn't entirely blame them, for nobody wanted to be Rob's next target. But as I stood there, covered in coffee, I knew one thing for sure. This jerk wasn't going to get the last laugh. Rob didn't stop there, though. He made it a daily mission to turn my workday into an obstacle course of pranks. My car mysteriously ended up in another parking lot one afternoon, and at least once a week I'd find my office supplies moved around or hidden in strange places. No matter how much I gritted my teeth, I couldn't escape his constant torment. It wasn't just me either. Rob's pranks were his way of asserting power over everyone in the office. Then one day, everything changed with the arrival of a new captain. But while the captain's kindness and professionalism stood in stark contrast to Rob's behavior, it didn't take long for him to notice the dysfunction in the office. It was when Rob took his antics too far, though, that the captain decided to take action. But the captain didn't stop there. He knew that Rob needed to be taught a lesson that would stick, and he wasn't about to let this go. One day, Rob went too far. He'd already pulled countless pranks, each more petty and invasive than the last. When I walked out to the parking lot that day, the sight that greeted me was nothing short of a nightmare. I could hear my own pulse ringing in my ears, and then without thinking I started toward the car, as if maybe I could fix it just by walking over and somehow putting everything back in place. It wasn't just the inconvenience of it all, or the ridiculousness of my car sitting there with no tires. But I wasn't going to let Rob get away with it. I followed the captain outside, watching him confront Rob with an authority that Rob could never hope to have. But that wasn't the end of it. This wasn't just about the tires. It was about sending a message. The captain knew this. It was time for Rob to learn that you don't mess with people without expecting some serious backlash. At this point, I knew the revenge had to be carefully calculated. The plan needed to be executed in a way that would leave Rob humiliated, but without leaving any trace that could point back to me. If Rob found out it was me, he could ruin my career in a heartbeat. I wasn't going to risk losing everything just to get back at him. I needed to be smart, precise, and completely under the radar. The captain was always thinking 2 steps ahead, and he knew that the most important thing was to protect my professional reputation. We worded it just carefully enough that it would get Rob's attention, but not give him any clear reason to believe it was a prank right away. The letter was a formal notification that Rob had been listed as a confirmed contact of an individual who had tested positive for an STD. It was vague, professional-sounding, and serious. The letter didn't mention any specific details. It didn't need to. It was meant to raise alarm and trigger Rob's deepest fears. So first, he made sure that I was reassigned under his direct supervision. I could feel the nervous excitement building inside me as I waited for Rob's predictable routine. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Rob would march over to the distribution tray to grab his mail. He'd always stand there, coffee in hand, cigarette dangling from his mouth, and casually skim through the envelopes as if he owned the place. It was almost like he was too absorbed in his own little world to notice anything else going on around him. He was a man who prided himself on his perfect image, especially in front of his wife, who he often bragged about controlling. The letter was designed to rattle his confidence, and knowing Rob, I was certain he would start panicking, imagining all sorts of worst-case scenarios. I don't know what this is," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if he were looking for someone to rescue him. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out who would be sent him such a letter. I knew Rob well enough to understand exactly what was going through his mind, but the captain, with perfect timing, stopped him in his tracks. "Wait, Rob," he said calmly. He turned to me and asked, "Do you think this is enough?" The fear of embarrassment, the panic about what his wife might think, the complete breakdown of his carefully constructed image, all of it was crashing down on him. This can't be real. There's no way. The whole office seemed to be pretending to go about their business, though I could see the subtle glances exchanged between a few colleagues who were in on the plan. Rob picked up the envelope, still blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. The captain and I exchanged a quick glance, both of us struggling to hold back our laughter as Rob fumbled with the letter, his face twisted in confusion and frustration. It was beautiful. His entire body stiffened, and I could see the shock ripple through him. He leaned in slightly and in his usual deadpan way asked, "So, Rob, ... We couldn't hold it in anymore." We burst out laughing, unable to keep our composure. Rob stood there, completely flustered, not understanding what had just happened. The rest of the office watched, confused, not sure whether to laugh along or stay quiet. "Have you been horsing around?" His tone was casual, but I could see the faintest smirk tug at the corner of his mouth. His hands started to shake as he continued reading the letter. It was almost like time slowed down for a moment. I couldn't contain my grin as I saw the color drain from his face. His eyes flicked nervously from the letter to the captain, then back to the paper as though he couldn't comprehend what he was reading. He tore open the letter casually, probably expecting another routine piece of correspondence. But the moment his eyes scanned the contents, everything changed. The atmosphere was electric, and I couldn't help but grin as Rob sauntered up to the distribution tray. His coffee was in hand, and his cigarette was between his fingers, his usual setup. I knew Rob wouldn't know what hit him when he opened that letter. He'd been the bully for so long, but now the tables were about to turn. As the letter sat waiting for him to open it, I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. The time for revenge had come. Rob had no idea what he was about to face, and I was more than ready to watch it all unfold. The more I thought about it, the sweeter the revenge felt. Rob would not just be humiliated. He'd be forced to question everything he had taken for granted about his life. It wasn't about physical revenge. No, it had to be something psychological, something that would chip away at his fragile ego. Timing was everything. I made sure to be in the office when the mail was handed out. The captain and I both knew that Rob had a routine. Every afternoon, he would go straight to his distribution tray, coffee in hand, and scan his mail there. This was when it would all unfold. I knew exactly where Rob's weak spot was his inflated sense of self-worth. He was hesitant at first, but after a little convincing, he agreed. The letter, carefully worded and designed to send Rob into a frenzy, was placed in the afternoon mail distribution. The captain made sure that he would be there when Rob opened it. There was no room for error. This was it, the moment everything would fall into place. With the official letterhead in hand, I knew I had everything I needed to execute my plan. He believed that he was untouchable, that he was the top dog, and that his reputation as a master, at home with his wife and family, was beyond reproach. He thought of himself as a perfect family man and a leader, and in that, he was incredibly vulnerable. If I could shake his pride, I could break him. This was crucial because Rob had just written my annual Airman Performance Report. This office dealt with mandatory interviews related to sexually transmitted infections and kept records of any potential contacts. Now, I wasn't about to involve anyone else in this, but I had a friend who worked in the environmental office. He owed me a favor, and I knew just how to use it. And by changing my reporting official, it ensured that Rob couldn't damage my career with a bad review. The timing was perfect. With the reporting official swap in place, Rob couldn't retaliate in any official capacity by skewing my APR. With that in place, I started thinking about how to really hit Rob where it would hurt him the most. The idea hit me when I thought about the work I had done with the base hospital and the environmental health office. I went to the hospital, casually chatting with my friend, and asked if he could help me out with some letterheads from his office. Next, the captain and I crafted the perfect letter. The idea was simple: create enough panic and embarrassment that Rob would start spiraling. We set everything up carefully, making sure the letter would be delivered in the afternoon distribution. I had to sit back and watch as the plan took shape. The plan was set in motion. Everything had been carefully timed and crafted to perfection. As the office clock ticked toward the end of the day, the tension in the air was palpable. But today was going to be different. I sat at my desk, trying to keep my composure. The captain, ever the actor, was standing just a few feet away, waiting for the moment Rob would open the letter. I watched from my desk as Rob's face instantly went pale. The captain, ever the professional, was perfectly calm. Rob, his voice now shaky and defensive, immediately denied everything. The panic was already starting to build in Rob. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the best part? He still had no idea who was behind it. At that moment, Rob started to walk toward the phone, no doubt planning to call his wife, or maybe even the base hospital to try and clear his name. It was at that exact moment that both the captain and I lost it. For Rob, it was a humiliating experience. For the rest of us, it was sweet, sweet revenge. It didn't take long for Rob to completely lose it. The calm, confident demeanor that he usually wore like armor started to crack almost immediately. The sound echoed through the office like a thunderclap. His coffee, which he had been holding just moments before, splashed out of the cup and stained a stack of paperwork, though I doubt Rob even noticed. His eyes were wild, darting from one corner of the room to another, as though he were searching for someone to blame. He stood there for a moment, frozen as the weight of the letter sank in. He didn't have to. His presence alone was enough to calm the situation. He looked at Rob with a calm expression, his voice low but firm. "You got what you deserved, Rob," he said quietly, and the words cut through the chaos like a knife. Rob stood there, shaking with rage, as the captain's words landed. The humiliation was complete. Rob had been outsmarted at his own game, and there was nothing he could do to take it back. The whole ordeal had left its mark on me, both the pranks and the revenge. The captain's leadership had given me a new perspective on what it meant to stand up for yourself and to not tolerate mistreatment. It wasn't just the prank itself, but the sheer humiliation that followed. It wasn't just about the pranks anymore. It was about crossing boundaries and thinking you could get away with it without facing repercussions. I had learned valuable lessons about standing up for myself, the power of careful planning, and the importance of moving on when the time was right. Rob had been a bully, but I turned the tables on him in a way he'd never see coming. Sometimes the best revenge is a calculated plan that takes down the bully at their own game. It was sweet, it was satisfying, and it earned me the respect of my peers. If you ever find yourself dealing with someone like Rob, remember, patience and planning go a long way. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this revenge story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And while Rob was left to deal with the consequences of his own actions, I walked away with a new sense of freedom and control over my future. Rob had learned the hard way that messing with the wrong person could lead to far more than he ever anticipated. Rob's image, carefully constructed over the years, was shattered in front of everyone. The office environment had shifted. No longer were people afraid of him. Word of what happened spread like wildfire through the ranks, and soon it became a point of discussion among the higher-ups. There was a general consensus that Rob had finally gotten what was coming to him. He'd crossed the line, and everyone knew it. His ego had been deflated, and his reputation, once built on intimidation and manipulation, was left in tatters. He had led with integrity, and in doing so, he showed me that there was more to life than being stuck in a cycle of petty office drama. The captain didn't just help me execute the revenge. He gave me the courage to walk away from a situation that no longer served me. Though the satisfaction of watching Rob unravel was sweet, the entire experience made me realize something important. I was better off leaving the toxic environment that had been created in that office. Rob's reign of bullying had taken its toll on all of us, and it was clear that staying in that atmosphere wasn't healthy for anyone. His hands, which had been trembling when he read the letter, now began to flail wildly, as if he were trying to regain some control over the situation. His eyes continued to dart around the office, probably wondering if anyone was going to break the silence and admit to the prank. He had been outwitted, humiliated, and left standing in the wreckage of his own reputation. It was sweet justice. For months, Rob had made our lives miserable with his childish antics, but now he was the one who was the joke. And for the first time in a long time, the office felt like it had a sense of balance again. We were no longer living under Rob's reign of terror. He had gotten exactly what was coming to him, and the sweet, silent satisfaction of seeing him unravel was enough to make everything worth it. But no one did. We all kept our lips sealed, pretending to be as clueless as he was. The prank had worked better than we could have ever hoped. But the real victory wasn't in Rob's breakdown. It was in the fact that he had no one to turn to for help. He was completely alone in his humiliation. The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by Rob's increasingly frantic movements. He was starting to realize that he had no way of getting out of this, and the harder he tried to control his anger, the worse it became. But there was no control left for Rob. His face twisted in disbelief, and the initial shock quickly morphed into an angry, panicked rage. It started with a loud, sharp motion as he knocked over the distribution boxes on the counter, scattering papers everywhere. I could hear him muttering to himself, but it wasn't coherent, just fragments of curses and disbelief. This can't be real. Who would do this? His voice was growing higher and more frantic with every passing second. I watched from my desk, my heart racing with excitement. This was it. This was the moment where everything came together. Rob was losing it, completely unraveling in front of everyone, and he had no idea who was behind it. I couldn't help but stifle a laugh. It was the classic Rob move. Instead of owning up to his mistakes, he lashed out in frustration, making everyone else the target of his anger. But this time, no one was going to back him up. Everyone was just watching. They were all silently enjoying the spectacle, some of them with amused smiles barely concealed behind their hands. But none of us were saying a word. The beauty of it was that he was so focused on finding someone to blame that he didn't even consider the possibility that the joke was on him. The fact that no one else in the office was stepping up to explain things only made him more desperate, more confused. Rob's temper flared even more as he threw his car keys across the room, sending them clattering against the wall. The captain, however, kept his cool. He didn't raise his voice or shout. What made the whole scene even sweeter was that Rob had no clue who was behind it all. The irony of it all was perfect. Rob, the man who had terrorized the office with his pranks and intimidation, had finally met his match. I couldn't help but let out a quiet chuckle as I watched him stumble over his own emotions. It was over. Rob had been thoroughly and completely outsmarted. After the dust settled and Rob's meltdown was nothing but a distant memory, I knew it was time for me to move on. Not long after my revenge, I volunteered for an overseas assignment. It felt like the right move. As for Rob, the fallout from the prank stuck with him long after the incident. Rob's breakdown didn't just make him the laughingstock of the office. It served as a reminder that actions have consequences. For me, the experience was a turning point. In the end, this was more than just a prank. It was a lesson in standing up for yourself.